On November 6, 1869, two college teams lined up on a field in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and played a game that resembled something between soccer and rugby, a chaotic scramble of 25 players per side kicking and batting a round ball toward makeshift goals. Nobody on that field could have imagined that this rough, disorganized contest between Rutgers and Princeton was the first flicker of a sport that would one day fill stadiums with over 100,000 people, dominate American television every Sunday, and become a billion-dollar cultural institution. This is the story of how American football clawed its way out of chaos and confusion to become the most watched sport in the United States. This story matters because football is not simply entertainment in America. It shapes Sunday routines, defines school spirit in towns across the country, and generates a level of national obsession unmatched by almost any other form of entertainment. But few people actually know how strange, violent, and uncertain the sport's early years really were, or how close it came to being banned entirely before it ever had the chance to become what it is today. To understand where this story truly starts, you have to go back to that Rutgers versus Princeton game in 1869, though what these students played looked almost nothing like modern football. It was closer to a version of association football or soccer, where players could only kick or bat the ball with their bodies, not carry it in their hands. Rutgers won that first contest 6-4, and over the following years, similar informal matches spread among elite East Coast universities. But there was no unified rulebook, meaning games often depended entirely on whatever rules the two competing schools happened to agree upon beforehand. The man who changed everything, the figure historians widely credit as the true father of American football, was Walter Camp, a student and later coach at Yale University. Beginning in the 1880s, Camp pushed through a series of revolutionary rule changes that transformed the sport from a rugby-like scrum into something distinctly new. He introduced the line of scrimmage, replacing the chaotic rugby scrum with an organized formation where one team would snap the ball to begin each play. He also introduced the concept of downs, requiring a team to advance the ball a certain distance within a limited number of attempts or surrender possession, a rule that forced strategy and planning into what had previously been mostly brute chaos. Camp also reduced the number of players on the field from 25 to 11 per side, creating the more structured, position-based game that modern fans would actually recognize. Despite these organizational improvements, the sport in its early decades was shockingly, almost unbelievably violent. Players wore little to no protective equipment, and formations like the flying wedge, where a cluster of offensive players linked arms and charged forward as a single unstoppable mass, led to horrific injuries. The situation became so dire that in 1905 alone, at least 18 college football players died from injuries sustained during games, a death toll that shocked the entire nation and pushed the sport to the brink of being banned outright at the college level. This crisis reached all the way to the White House. President Theodore Roosevelt, himself a passionate advocate for physical toughness and rugged competition, was alarmed by the mounting death toll and summoned representatives from major football programs to the White House in 1905, demanding the sport reform itself or risk being eliminated from universities entirely. This pressure led directly to the formation of what would later become the National Collegiate Athletic Association. The NCAA, established initially to oversee player safety and standardize rules across the sport. Crucially, these reforms introduced the legal forward pass in 1906, a change that fundamentally transformed football from a game of brutal, grinding collisions into one that also rewarded speed, precision, and strategic passing. While college football rapidly grew in popularity throughout the early 1900s, professional football developed along a much rougher, less organized path. Small-town teams across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and other Midwestern states began paying players informally, but there was no coordinated structure connecting any of these scattered professional clubs. That changed on September 17, 1920, when representatives from several of these teams met in Canton, Ohio, in the showroom of an automobile dealership, and formed the American Professional Football Association. 2 years later, in 1922, that organization renamed itself the National Football League, the NFL, the very league that would eventually become the dominant force in American sports entertainment. The early NFL, however, struggled enormously for legitimacy and financial stability. Teams folded constantly, player salaries were unreliable, and the league lived in the shadow of college football. which remained vastly more popular with the American public throughout the 1920s and 1930s. One of the most important figures who helped stabilize the professional game was Harold "Red" Grange, a college superstar at the University of Illinois, whose decision to turn professional and join the Chicago Bears in 1925 brought enormous mainstream attention and credibility to the fledgling NFL, drawing tens of thousands of fans who had never previously cared about professional football. The sport continued evolving through the following decades. But the true turning point that transformed football into a national phenomenon arrived on December 28, 1958, in a contest that became known as the greatest game ever played. The Baltimore Colts faced the New York Giants in the NFL championship game, which went into the league's first ever sudden death overtime, ending with a dramatic Colts victory. Broadcast to a massive national television audience, this single game is widely credited with proving that professional football could captivate viewers on an enormous scale, kickstarting the sport's explosive growth throughout American living rooms. Television proved to be the single most important force in football's rise to dominance. As broadcasts became more sophisticated throughout the 1960s, the sport grew increasingly lucrative, leading to fierce competition between the NFL and a rival league called the American Football League, founded in 1960. Rather than destroying each other through competition, the two leagues eventually agreed to merge in 1970, an agreement that had actually been negotiated years earlier in 1966. That same merger agreement created what would become the single biggest event in American sports television. The Super Bowl first played in January 1967, when the Green Bay Packers defeated the Kansas City Chiefs. The following decades saw football's popularity climb to unprecedented heights. Fueled by legendary figures like quarterback Joe Montana, whose precision and calm leadership defined the San Francisco 49ers dynasty of the 1980s, and later stars like Jerry Rice, widely considered the greatest wide receiver in the sport's history. Rule changes continued shaping the game throughout this era, opening up passing offenses and making the sport faster and more exciting for television audiences increasingly hungry for high-scoring, dramatic contests. But football's rapid growth eventually collided with a serious and painful reckoning. Beginning in the early 2000s, medical researchers began uncovering disturbing evidence connecting repeated head trauma in football players to a degenerative brain condition known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. Dr. Bennett Omalu's groundbreaking research, first published in 2005 after examining the brain of former NFL player Mike Webster, forced the league to confront the long-term dangers players faced from repeated concussions, a challenge eerily similar to the safety crisis football had faced exactly a century earlier in 1905. This revelation led to major rule changes throughout the 2010s, including stricter concussion protocols, penalties for dangerous helmet-to-helmet hits, and significant investment in improved protective equipment, as the league worked to make the sport safer without stripping away the physical intensity that made it so compelling to watch. Today, American football stands as the most popular sport in the United States by a significant margin, with the Super Bowl consistently drawing some of the largest television audiences in the entire country each year. The NFL generates billions of dollars annually. College football fills stadiums with over 100,000 devoted fans on any given Saturday, and the sport has expanded internationally, with regular season games now played in London and Germany as the league pushes to grow its global audience. From a chaotic, ruleless scramble on a New Jersey field in 1869, through a violent crisis that nearly ended the sport entirely, through decades of television-driven expansion, football has continuously reshaped itself to survive every challenge placed in front of it. That is why this story still matters. American football's history is fundamentally a story about reinvention under pressure, a sport that faced potential extinction not once, but multiple times throughout its history, and each time found a way to rebuild itself into something stronger, safer, and more compelling than before. It stands today not just as a game, but as a reflection of a country that has always been drawn to contests of strength, strategy, and resilience, values that have shaped the sport just as much as the sport has shaped the culture around it. If this story gave you a new appreciation for America's most popular sport, hit like, subscribe for more deep dives into the history behind the games we love.